Hi, everybody. Before we get to another great interview, the Two Opinionated podcast could really use your help. And it's easy, it's free. IMDb, which is the entertainment database, imdb.com, named us a top 100 podcast. We came in at number 82. That's a big deal because there's 15 million podcasts and growing. So to be named to anybody's top 100 list, pretty big deal for us. And the way you can help is to go to imdb.com, look up the Two Opinionated podcast, and that's it. Just bringing our page up. That traffic really helps us out. Our YouTube channel is MeisterCon Pod. All we ask is that you subscribe. It's also free, but that really helps us to attract these amazing guests that we keep bringing on the program. And that's it. Two easy ways for you to support us, and we would really appreciate the help. Now let's get to that interview. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Two Opinionated. I'm so excited today. I've got journalist, author, Richie McGinniss with me. So welcome, Richie.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to talk with you. The book looks terrific, and I know we'll get into that, but let's start with you. Give us a little bit of your background. What got you into journalism? At what point did you decide, okay, now I need to write a book?
Yeah, well, that's a two-part question for sure.
Right.
Well, and I actually, I kind of almost winced at the word journalist as a label for my profession because I came from the video side.
Yeah.
And I came to DC in 2008 as a freshman at Georgetown University, studied Middle Eastern history and Arabic. And in studying the language and living over there for a couple, 5 months, I kind of decided that government did over there, I didn't necessarily agree with most of what they did over there. So I got interested in media. I was always like, film class in high school and stuff like that. But I got an internship at Al Jazeera Arabic, and then I went to MSNBC's NBC as a production assistant. And so I was like answering phones, serving coffee, but I was among, the best cameramen, the best studio guys, the best on camera, like talent. Supposedly, I mean, I think there's a certain, stratification that I saw when I was working there, a hierarchy. There's HR departments and entire boardrooms that decide what you can and can't say. So
That's right.
that brought me in my transition to digital media. I left NBC and I was working as a bartender, just like producing freelancing videos, a lot of drone work, stuff like that, and landed a job at Levin TV, Mark Levin, who's a conservative.
Yeah.
And so that was during the end of the Obama years. And I actually, in 2008, when I moved to DC, I was knocking on doors for Obama. Folks, we're gonna change. Everyone gets a free boat. But
that's pretty good, Obama.
I'll work on it. I'll work on it. We'll see. Free boat sounds pretty nice though. I was idealistic, but then when he hired Hillary Clinton as his Secretary of State, seeing it from my Middle Eastern perspective, my area of the time, I became disillusioned, and I said, hey, let's check out this other side of America that I really didn't understand growing up in the New York area, and then being in DC and working at NBC News. I had a very coastal coastal elite background in those two cities, and New York and DC. So I, started that job as a video editor, and I was the junior most video editor there during the campaign season 2015 to 2016. And I actually took the job at Daily Caller. I interviewed for it actually December of 2016. That's in the beginning of the book.
Yeah.
But I started the job at the Caller in May of 2017. And so that was really like a moment where, I try to place the reader in that moment because it's hard to take people back to before the toothpaste came out of the tube and the beginning of the Trump. And I was working for a nascent media outlet that Tucker Carlson founded, and at the time Tucker was on Fox, but he had just gotten the primetime slot.
Right.
So it was like before he became that household name. And Daily Caller itself was actually like a lot of Bernie supporters during the election, followed because they were anti-Hillary, anti-establishment. It was more of an anti-establishment establishment, conservative leaning website. But
Well, and
not to be
that's
like,
when he had his, I mean, his biggest campaign was probably that cycle.
yes, exactly. And that's, we could go back and forth. The WikiLeaks emails did, show that Hillary Clinton effectively, her campaign sandbagged Bernie Sanders during the primaries.
Yeah.
But we can get into that another day. I think, I was very much like, I viewed Bernie similarly to Trump, which is like, this is a shakeup to the system.
Right.
And as a young person who had seen Obama I felt like he, more than changed the system, kind of bought into it, inherited the, Clintonian Bush era free trade policies that, really led to the offshoring of a lot of jobs. And Bernie's economic policies actually had more in common with Trump than they did with Hillary Clinton's or Mitt Romney's. As
I know
far
it's
as like,
kind of crazy looking back, but they did.
absolutely. And I mean, I actually like quote, Bernie in the book talking about the offshoring of millions of jobs to China. And it sounds like Trump, but it was Bernie Sanders. And that was during his campaign. And so anyways, if you fast forward to 2020, when the pandemic, basically I had built this video business from two of us up to 10 people. And we had a certain product that we provided to people, like on the ground reporting, man on the street style stuff. And the pandemic hit, and all of our revenue, 90%, like just overnight, just gone. And so that's really where the book starts, is me, trying to keep this video operation afloat. And then the civil unrest came to DC, that a couple of our young reporters showed that, like, with their cell phones, they were able to record moments that the corporate media, with their big cameras, standing outside with their microphones, being their narratives, whichever, platitude they have from this side or that. And we just recorded the video and just put it up without commentary. They were wearing this, they said this, pepper spray this, tear gas that.
Well, I mean, that used to be basically what we got from reporters. We just got what happened. We didn't get an opinion about it. We just got this is what occurred.
Well, and I get into that because my boss was a jarhead, and he's very, like, plain talking guy, Jeffrey Ingersoll, and he basically told us, on the outset, and we reinforced this on the ground. Is myself, Shelby Talcott, who was a former pro tennis player, and this younger guy, Jorge Ventura, who came on as an intern literally in May, 3 days before George Floyd was killed. So this our little team, we just had a simple mission. It was just go in and record video, and you'll get more retweets if you call them BLM terrorists, or later on if you call them MAGA insurrectionists, but you'll get fired. So my boss told us that, and we had that mission going into it, and basically just providing the public with the video and letting them decide. And so I think the reason why, just to answer that question in, I guess, a long-winded way, is the discourse has been basically monetized from the cable news, print mediums, to digital, where you're rewarded if you basically jump into one of these two echo chambers that are basically two separate realities online. So if you look at two separate people's Twitter feeds, or YouTube or Facebook or any of those platforms, you'll see two totally different realities coming out of a Kamala Harris rally or a Trump rally. Right. When it comes to, I think this book is very timely because it's, number one, I think it's, it represents my experience in new media, which has shown, to replace a lot of the legacy outlets in different areas. And where we did that was just simply by being on the ground with our cell phones and asking people their questions of why they were there and why they came out that night, and recording, violent interactions with police, both when the police were brutal, when the BLM supporters, rioters were violent, agitating, or when, the Proud Boys came in and beat the crap out of a guy in the Chaz. So, like, we were putting that footage up no matter what the political ideation of the people, or what the profession, cops or protesters, or what
I mean, to me, that sounds dangerous. I mean, how much danger were you in when you were, kind of on the front lines there?
I actually, different people who were on the ground had different approaches. So a lot of people, they were doing that kind of commentary, and that's fine. That's their prerogative. It's this, it's a free country and you can cover things how you want. But our mission was our own. But we did have other people on the ground who would wear like press and stuff like that, emblazoned, so that basically the police wouldn't target them. But the way that I saw it was like, number one, if you're wearing press and you approach somebody in these kinds of situations, they're going to kind of like be standoffish, immediately ask you where you're
or they completely change their behavior.
Yes, exactly. So I went with more like a fly on the wall approach, especially with more of a video background. So that's why when I say like journalist, it was more like just kind of more guiding along a first person perspective and just asking questions that I think the audience.
You're almost like more of a documentarian.
Yeah, I that's why I think the word journalist, like, it has a pejorative these days, and it's assumed what you're talking about, that there's opinion, and that's not to say the book doesn't have opinion. I put my opinion in there, and just because it's more fun, but and also explains why.
Well, that's where they should be in a book.
Yes, and then in the book, I try to go a little bit deeper than just what they said. It's like why I aim my camera here and there, why I stood my ground, what the actual experience was of being there, rather than just like what the pixels on the screen come through as, right? So beyond just what the videos that were being recorded and the actual person to person interactions that I was having, and cultural experiences and traumatic ones as well. So the book, yeah, I think it's a little bit different than what our mission was, but at the same time, if you read a lot of like Trump era books, they're all like, here's why my side is right and yours is wrong.
Right.
But I started my own publishing company because after talking to a few publishers and a few agents, they all told me, basically, if you want to sell books, you have to pick this side or that. And back in like 2022, when I was starting this project, they were like, Trump's not running again. And so, I think in media, people think like what they want to happen is what's going to happen somehow. But
no, I think that's true.
Why
they say it enough, it'll happen.
And if you look back, I mean, I look back to the counterculture movement that my parents experienced in the late 60s and early 70s. They both went to Woodstock. They were in DC for the late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah.
Like literally when Georgetown had the campus tear gassed. And so that, like, not only within my family, but I think within the American consciousness, is like an important previous period of unrest. And if you look to the people who were covering that kind of stuff, like Joan Didion or Hunter S. Thompson, like so-called gonzo journalists, like they were subjective in that they told you, what their opinions were and why they did this and that. Hunter S. Thompson, obviously had a bizarre logic for a lot of things. But what he did for the reader was by showing his interactions with these individuals who were on the campaign trail or just out in the middle of America. He showed you a window into who they really were, and like just trying to paint more so than pass judgment on whether or not what they were doing was right or wrong. That, like with the Hells Angels, this is a great example as well. He was showing you who those guys were, and yeah, he would say like, "Oh, this miserable guy did that," but it wasn't like it didn't come from a place of moral superiority. I think that's the point. And I think when you get into these kind of chaotic situations, what you realize is that within all of us is this possibility to go to the lizard brain, because when the tear gas goes off and the pepper spray, or when the gunshots go off at the end of this first book, which ends at the end of the BLM in Kenosha, Wisconsin, at the end of the summer. And then, part 2 ramps up with all the MAGA stuff. But that experience, when the gunshots go off, you realize like there's no thinking. And there's this part of your brain that says, is this right or wrong, turns off. And I think that's what people, whether it's January 6th, whether it's, a crowd of people in Lafayette Park who get pepper sprayed, there's like a certain visceral reaction, a certain tribe mentality that happens when you see one of your fellow protesters, demonstrators turned rioters, engage with police, get pepper sprayed, get knocked down,
you would assume. Now, I know it's like with January 6th, there seemed to be some planning, at least with parts of those people that went. But you would assume most of the time the intention is to peacefully demonstrate, and then it escalates.
It's interesting because I would draw and it's like, this isn't about whataboutism. I'm just trying to like lay it out in a way that's digestible. I do think that Portland was a similar example in that you had a very large group of people who would come out on a given night and they would listen to the speakers. There'd be 5,000 people. I'm very open with the numbers in the book. The 5,000 people, 8 p.m. The leaders of the protest in their megaphone said this and that. And then fast forward 2 hours and there's 350 people in front of the fence, 1 block away at the federal courthouse, and they're smashing into the fence, intentionally agitating police. So it doesn't take a large number of people to create this spectacle.
Right.
And in both cases of January 6th in Portland and a lot of these other situations where Kenosha as well, like the media paints either it's mostly peaceful or it's, insurrectionists, BLM, domestic terrorists. And the fact of the matter is like both of those things can be true at the same time. And so January 6th, yeah, there were a lot of people who just walked in there and said, oh, goddamn, check this out, and even one guy I recorded my most viral video of that, despite going all the way to the house doors with the sergeant at arms with guns pointed on the other side. Despite recording that, my most viral video is a guy who rolled a joint and smoked it under the Capitol Rotunda. And so I think it's easy to do a black and white view, but when you actually like come face to face with these people, one of the guys who was smoking a joint in the Capitol, I said, why are you smoking weed in the Capitol? And he said, whatever, life sucks. Something like, I'm probably going to get in trouble again, but fuck it. Sorry, I'm not sure.
He's gonna enjoy himself while he's there.
So, and then you have that, but you also simultaneously have people who 5 minutes earlier I recorded bashing on the house doors while the votes were being counted and literally breaking open the window and sticking their face in there. They got into the Senate, but on the House side, I was on the House side. I was behind those guys when there were only 2 police and 20 guys trying to break in, 20 rioters. Those are safe to call rioters for sure, because they clearly were trying to force their way into the doors. But a lot of those people, the doors by the time they got there were open, and all of the signs had been trampled and the fences and the barriers were gone. So I think it's when you actually read the book and you actually like put yourself in those shoes, you get a different perspective than you would if you just like hear the news on Fox News or CNN.
Well, I kind of took it that way, is you've got a large group that's, yes, they're concerned about what's going on, but most of them are probably peaceful with that. But it doesn't take a lot or a very big spark to set something off, and it escalates to somewhere that nobody expected it to go.
And like, I would say even like peaceful is necessary. It's like this word that I think with good intentions, like going out there, like, I guess if you believe enough in a cause, then when, like you said, when the crap hits the fan, then the compromises come pretty quickly.
That's right.
Right. That's like, yes, like I think a lot of those people who did physically engage with cops didn't go out there wanting to do that.
Right.
And the same with Portland, but like when the way that things escalate, oh, you hit into the fence, oh, you bumped into the shield, oh, you got pepper sprayed, oh, and then once you get to that point, it's like, when I was in the Capitol, like that guy offered me the joint, and I'm like, in my lizard brain, I'm like, all I want is something to take the edge off of like what I'm experiencing right now. But I told him I'm on the clock because
I'm working.
No, that was my role. I had congressional press credentials. So, I felt my responsibility to go in there. I'm not going to trust the feds to tell us what happened in Portland, and I'm not going to trust them. My role is to show people, through my constitutional protections as a journalist, as somebody documenting what's going on. I had to go in there in my mind. And, that's like the same as embedding with the guys in Portland. I call them the umbrella gang, because like nobody's going to tell you they're Antifa if you ask them if Antifa. Like, hey, are you Antifa? You know, you might see a couple patches here and there or some flags, but the Proud Boys, they'll tell you they're proud. You know,
Right.
the
It's
black
kind of in the
bulls.
name.
Exactly. So I just call them the Umbrella Gang because they use the umbrellas as a shield.
That's funny. Yeah, that's actually kind of funny. Well,
Had to come up.
you were kind of in the middle of it there with Kyle Rittenhouse, and that was kind of what I was wondering at that, because I know there was some bullets flying around. How close were you to that situation?
Well, you know, in the book as well as in the interviews that I've done since then, it's like I'm clear, you know, I put myself in that situation.
Yeah.
I was out there. The New York Times uh, journalist actually decided to go home that night because the first 2 nights of rioting, I got there on the second night of rioting,
Yeah.
and the shooting on the third, but they left before the third night because they knew it was going to be like extremely dangerous, and I don't blame them. So I put myself in that situation, but meeting Kyle Rittenhouse basically happened because it was an extension of a story from the previous night. Shelby Talcott and I, my coworker, we interviewed a guy who was using a power washer to put out fire in front of
Oh
this
wow.
car lot and auto mechanic shop. And we asked him, "Hey, what are you doing out here?" And he simply stopped the power washer for a moment, just said, "You see any fire department?" So
Yeah.
basically, these had been asked by the business owner to go out there, and obviously were paid for their work, but they, you know, were putting out fires because the fire department wasn't responding in any quick fashion. So the next night, I actually recorded like the same rigmarole of they bang into the fence, the cops come out front, they form the shield line, they use the tear gas, they use the flashbangs, they force everyone away into the park. I mean, this is the same as it happened in Portland, and I go the internet, whether or not it was because of a jamming system or because it was a large crowd or whatever,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I do know the FBI was flying a Cessna over that came out in the trial, but
Yeah.
we'll get to that at the end of the story. I went back to the hotel to get Wi-Fi,
Right.
and I logged in and I saw these armed guys in front of that same business that I saw the power washer man the previous night. So I said, dropped what I was doing immediately. I was just like, I got to go get this story because this is a continuation of what I saw the previous
Yeah.
night. First we had the volunteer fire brigade, and now we have the volunteer armed, you know, security. And so I ran out there and like in front of the business was Kyle Rittenhouse. And I just said, "Does anyone want to tell me why you guys are here?" And he offered himself up. And night of, after the shooting, I told police like he looked like he was in his 20s, but he had a baby face. So he appeared
Right.
very young, and like he didn't, you know,
He looks
this.
really young.
Yes, and that's part of like the the role of like, okay, so I'm there to ask questions, but also to get to the core of like
Right.
what's really on. And I asked him multiple times. Oh, said he had his med pack to check after protesters, and I said, "Oh, so you got a med kit? So you're?" He said, "I'm an EMT." And I said, "So like you're EMT certified?" And they said, "Oh, well, I have my ALS, which is aquatic lifeguard, or AL or whatever, aquatic lifeguard certification." And that's, you know, I was a surf instructor. I know that's definitely not EMT.
Right.
So I went through our training and all that. It took me like 10 minutes. I was barely paying attention. Uh, so like that's not an
Yeah, it's
EMT.
not
That's
quite the same thing.
a question. You know, he kind of brushed it off and walked off towards the protesters. He was saying medical. Does anyone need medical? And I could see people looking at him angrily, mostly from behind masks, just scowling at him for carrying a rifle, right? That the rifle, just like the American flag, we could get into why this is the case. And that's not the point in the story here.
Yeah.
Is he had a rifle. It was legal to carry the rifle in Wisconsin, even legal for a 17-year-old to carry a rifle of that barrel length, which came out in the trial because of hunting laws. So
Right.
he was doing something that was legal, but he was viewed by the protesters as threatening, as offensive, and to the point where some guys yelled at him. And I went to interview these guys who yelled at him, like, "Oh, you think you're cool, man? Think you're in a movie? We remember you." And I went over to interview them, parted from Kyle. He kind of walked away, and I wanted to get their side of the story. He thought he was
Yeah.
out here with the med pack and with the gun to provide security and medical attention. And I was asking them, one of the guys had a handgun, in his waist belt. Another guy had bricks in his hand. And when I aimed the phone at them, they approached me like threateningly. The guy with the handgun stood up, the guy with the bricks stepped out, and I was like, dudes, I'll put the phone down. I just want to hear what you guys had to say. And to actually use my like break glass in case of emergency.
Right.
This gonzo, I was like, does anyone want a White Claw? So at the left wing BLM stuff, I would do White Claws, and then at the Proud Boys, I would do Budweisers and cigarettes.
That's
So,
funny.
so I broke out the White Claw, and the guy with the handgun actually was like, "Yeah, I'll take a White Claw." And so I handed it to him. And right as I was about to crack my own, I had one more left in my gas mask bag. I saw Kyle Rittenhouse running down the street with a fire extinguisher now. So he had the med kit, the AR, and the fire extinguisher now, a smaller fire extinguisher, sprinting down the street. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever's going on there is more important. So I just said, guys, I got to go. And I ran after him, even called my coworker. Something's about to go down. I don't know what's up. This guy's running. And that was right when I heard Joseph Rosenbaum scream at Kyle Rittenhouse, or there were a number of people screaming at that time. But he emerged from behind a car, and I hung up on her. I said, "Oh F, I gotta go." And I thought I turned my camera on, but I took a photo of the ground. So as I ran up behind Rosenbaum, who actually started chasing Rittenhouse into this, what turned out to be actually the car lot where I guess Kyle, this all came out after the fact, not from my first person perspective. He went there to put out vehicle fires. It was the same business owner. So it was Car Source was the name of the business. So that was the other Car Source lot. And the fire extinguisher was gone. He was running away from Rosenbaum. Rosenbaum was running after him. I was running behind them, thinking I was filming whatever was about to happen. And between that moment and the moment that Kyle turned around and had his gun 45 degrees towards the ground, standing still, and Rosenbaum continuing to run, I realized I was behind them. And it was actually like I told the police night of that I stepped to the side right as Rittenhouse dodged around Rosenbaum lunging for the gun. He said, "Fuck you," and he dove for the gun. Rittenhouse dodged and shot what I said 3 or 4. It was 4 shots in 0.75 seconds. He shot, and I told the police that I stepped to the side, took 2 steps right before he shot. But actually, the footage after the fact showed that I did not. I stepped right afterwards. So I had kind of rearranged that in my mind. But the other thing I released is that as Rosenbaum was collapsing, I looked down, like I verbatim told the cops, because I have the footage, which I transcribed in the book of me in the interrogation room. But I said, did I just get fucking shot? I looked down at my legs because I felt something go past my legs. And like I'd heard, from like servicemen or whatever, or interviews that, oh, if you get hit, like you won't even know it. Like, and so I'd stamp my feet. So that's what I told the police, that I had looked down and stamped my feet, and I didn't see Rosenbaum collapse. So that's part of my timeline of telling them exact witness. And the prosecutors took that testimony and turned me into a victim in the case. So I was not only not recording the video, so I was the closest one in the shooting, but didn't have video evidence to back it up. I also was a victim in the case. So I was not only a key witness, but also like a named victim, didn't ask for any of that. I just was an idiot who ran after a 17-year-old with an. And so, I get into how the bigger story of the fallout from finding out all these different facts about the first man that he shot, Joseph Rosenbaum, who basically I tried to save his life, but he died within 10 minutes of landing on the gurney in the hospital. I carried him where he was shot to a vehicle which was right across the street, and fortunately the hospital was right there. But I mean, there was nothing that they could do. The bullet actually turned out going down his back and through his lungs and shattering his pelvis. I think that's what I deduced based on the autopsy. But I watched this man die. I didn't know who he was, and then I found out afterwards he had committed all these heinous crimes and sexually abused minors. But I looked deeper into that story, and he had been abused by his stepdad, and the kids that he are in jail for the same crimes. And I talk in the book. Kyle Rittenhouse, the first man he shot Rosenbaum, the second man he shot Huber, and the third man he shot Gage Groskowitz, whose bicep he shot off. I saw that in the hospital right after I loaded Rosenbaum onto the gurney. I saw him come in, and I was like, "What is going on out there?" But all four of them, the most closely damaged by the tragedy, and we could talk about Kyle Rittenhouse and what
Well,
his
yeah, Kyle, because the whole thing was just kind of tragic.
that's my point, is that they're all broken families,
Yeah.
and it's a deeper level of tragedy, of intergenerational tragedy, that exists in cities like Kenosha, that actually is the reason why Trump got voted into office in the first place. There's the same discontentment that I saw among the BLMers, among the Bernie supporters, and among the MAGA folks, and the Trump's form of capturing that disaffected feeling in this present age that we live in. And also, like I said, the media environment that we live in, where if you say something controversial, you'll get more retweets, you'll get more attention to your profile, build your brand. And that's like the content economy that we live in now. So
Right.
you have like new media, which isn't always, I'm not saying that everybody participates in that, but obviously our political discourse is led by the leaders, and that, it is what it is.
It
We
is
have a
what
real
it is.
president of the United States, so it's going to go a certain way. And the buttoned up, I also see the other side of it, where Obama, when I was working at NBC, his press secretary, Jay Carney, who's like the opposite of Sean Spicer, spoke so slowly. And if you wanted to get a question in that briefing room, you had to ask the right questions. If you asked the wrong question, if you stepped over that line, you could ask a tough question, but if you asked the wrong question, then you're not going to get another question. Like, your career in the White House briefing room as a White House correspondent is effectively over, because you're not going to get any more.
That seems bad to me. That doesn't seem
Yeah.
like that should be the way it runs.
There's a duality between Donald Trump and him putting exactly what's going through his brain right directly onto Truth Social or Twitter, and people freaking out about it, and the kind of like hiding behind this corporate HR version of what a real person is. It's the same thing you had in news, like, "Oh well, Tom, it's fiery but mostly peaceful out here." That versus somebody who's on a podcast who's just talking like they would talk normally.
Yeah.
That same kind of division of authenticity between new and old media is, I think, one of the reasons why Trump won this time around so handily, is because he stepped
Well,
into
do
that
you
new.
think would he have lost in 2020 if the pandemic hadn't happened? Or would he have just been a two-term president?
I mean, that is speculation that I think it's
Because it's kind of
probably what
remarkable when you look at it, because Biden won
the
pretty handily,
yeah.
and then it
Well,
flipped this time.
and it's all of that about like the election and the stolen election and all that. My main stance on that is, like, nobody cried foul when Hillary Clinton called Trump an illegitimate president in 2016, and this whole Russian collusion narrative was spun up. That was all within the guardrails of what you were
Right.
allowed to say. The moment that you question the results of 2020, when voting went from 30% absentee to what they call mail-in now, and it was like 70 something, almost up to towards 80% of
Yeah.
voters. So you're not even allowed to ask questions like that. You'll get banned on these platforms, and just for putting those two
Really?
words next, I mean, you won't get banned, you'll get a strike, which is one step closer to getting banned. And if
That's
you get
right.
banned, then and see you later video team, and everybody that you clawed your way for years to get that audience and to get that revenue and to hire that team and to produce that content, like, that's one leg of the stool gone. So if you have Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and Twitter and all these different platforms that have their own rules, but largely the rules share a lot of characteristics. Like, you're not allowed to ask about the schmack scene, and you're not allowed to ask about the election of 2020. I'm just like, I'm an American. I thought the internet was where free speech was supposed to be happening out of cable news, you know? So there is a line between like these entities that are now directing our discourse are massive corporations, just like the ones that ran the cable news outfits. So I think what's interesting about the times that we live in right now is that we have this kind of wild west of the internet that's now being corralled by the Googles and the Metas of the world. But ultimately, I'm a classical liberal where I would say the best disinfectant is sunlight, and that the more that you try, the more censorious you become writ large across these huge platforms, the more people will go to the darker corners of the web. And I definitely get in the book, of what those, what that does, what this kind of like rage economy does, especially when you start stepping on one side more clearly than you're stepping on the other.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So when does RIOT Diet come out?
So it's out. It's out. So RIOT Diet, the first book came out on election day, November 5th.
Excellent.
And it does. I think I said on Twitter when I announced it and to my friends, like, hey, give it to your liberal friend if they want to know why it is that we're here today, and give it to your conservative friend if they want to see what it was like to run, a mostly pro-Trump audience of a media operation, what it was like to run the video on these platforms during the Trump years. And
well, that's what I'm excited about, is to see the not necessarily both sides, but just how we got to here.
Yes.
And you kind of got to know a little bit about both sides to understand it. But I that's more what I'm interested in, is just kind of that progression, because it's such the last decade, it's been interesting.
It really did happen, but it did happen before Trump. Maybe you could argue it happened with the Tea Party, but Occupy movement. I mean, ever since the internet has started to encroach upon and take over the discourse, you've had these online movements and you've had these different groups that mobilize online. And it just so happens that now, in this present age, now fast forward to 2024, it's like the algorithms that are designed on these platforms are designed to keep people on them. And so you appeal to the most basic and primal of human emotions in order to keep people on those platforms. And it just so happens that the politicians of the present age have all agreed collectively to like get down and wrestle in the mud. I think that it's on both sides, and it's obviously the finger pointing always goes to Trump, but I think my book also documents multiple times where these big corporations have basically manipulated the truth to prove.
Well, I think that's the bigger issue, is it's the people behind the people.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
And we don't get, and they're kind of shielded, because most of the vitriol that is going both sides is directed at the face. But that's not necessarily who's causing the issues. It's the people behind.
Yes, and the companies that the book ends, I don't want to give too much away, but the book does end after the shooting and the fight that I had to correct the record. I went on Tucker Carlson, and then CNN took my words out of context, and I give full details of exactly how I went. My boss is the one who talked me off the ledge. I wanted to stand my feet and say, oh, everyone at CNN is this and that and whatever. But I contacted a human being at CNN and we talked it through via email. And then he got the reporter who did the report, and he interviewed me and did a better report than was done on cable news, in my opinion.
Yeah.
As far as like what I witnessed from my perspective. And I was very close to the first shooting, which was critical in the impending trial.
Right.
So, but I had to fight to get on there. And if I hadn't have been, the question is if I hadn't have been maligned in the first place, would I ever have been on CNN just because I went on Tucker? The answer is probably no, but that's kind of the moral of the story, which is like through these chaotic events, if you just continue to surround yourself with good people who talk you off the ledge and also approach human beings rather than throw your fists at these faceless brands or these faceless massive corporations, like whether it's in Silicon Valley or DC or New York. So the human to human interaction is actually what I was trying to capture in the book.
Yeah.
Whether it's the investors, whether it's the employees at CNN or Daily Caller, and that's what the reader will get out of it. I think, regardless of where they come from the political spectrum, because I want somebody to read it in 20 years and get a feeling for like, wait, why did everyone just go crazy in 2020?
Well,
Like,
I wonder about that. I just talked to my wife about that. Is like, I wonder how this period of time is actually going to be remembered.
Well, that's exactly why I wrote the book. I took the time to quit my job and write the book because I thought about like what, how do you even, where do you begin to even explain this story? But
Yeah.
I knew that I had a front row seat from the end of the Obama years at NBC to Mark Levin during the campaign to Daily Caller during the Trump years, and then finally to the pandemic. I had a responsibility to put that down in writing and show something beyond just like what the videos that I recorded, which are, it took a long time. Obviously, we're here in 2024. I started in 2022. It took me a long time to put all of that chaos into some order, and I think it does. It was really a matter of taking what the media said, what I saw, what I recorded, and this bigger reality beyond these two separate narratives that were placed around all these different chaotic power vacuums, whether it's Portland or DC or New York or Chaz in Seattle or Kenosha or Minneapolis or just across the country. It was the same.
I know it's kind of bad when you can just keep naming cities.
No, well, that's true, but that's what happened in these. It was the same formula. It's like a Democrat-run city, Democrat mayor, Democrat governor, whatever the political leaders say. Oh, Trump, you're a poopy face, you're orange man bad, and we're not going to let your feds come in here. We're not going to let you tell us what to do.
Right.
Let's escalate the situation. And in the case of Seattle, it was like the dumbest example where they just seeded the police precinct and let a bunch of armed guards take over with barriers, not border walls, and guard this 6-block area for like weeks on it.
Crazy.
Until I don't want to again give too much away about the book, but it ended with people dying, and they were black, and all the people who were donating to BLM, like, what about those kids' families? The 16-year-old black kids.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it's all a lot easier to package if you have it like in a 30-second Facebook video, or you have it in this 3-minute news package that's aired, or even the documentaries that I've watched that have come out of this era and are telling people what happened on January 6th or what happened during the BLM stuff. It's like so from this side or that, and either they're portrayed in a very positive or a very negative light.
Right.
I just kind of paint the picture as good, bad, and ugly as it is, and just like let the audience decide.
Just doing that, to me, that makes you a journalist. I'm not sure that everybody that we're calling journalists today is actually what I would call a journalist, but I would call you a journalist.
But I'm not sure if I'll accept the title, but I appreciate that. I do.
Because I think you're telling the story. I know in the book you give some of your opinions, as you should. That's your book. But just in general, the videos you're taking, you're just telling the story. It's there. Let everybody else draw their conclusions. This is what happened.
And also in the book, I'm very honest about my own shortcomings in the midst of us drinking beers with the Umbrella Gang, getting too drunk and slurring my doing dumb things. I certainly lost my cool in multiple instances that are well documented in the book. And it was my coworker Shelby or Jorge, or it was my family. I'm the middle of 3 boys. Like the people that surrounded me, my boss at Daily Caller, Jeff, like I mentioned, just these different forces who at the time that oh, okay, take a deep breath and like, let's go through this. Yeah. So that's really the moral of the book, is like, when we're so engrossed in these political tribes, what really matters is what's eroding, which is our opportunity to have a stable family, a stable job. And I think that the most recent election, people have attributed many things, but look, historically in the United States spent economy, and people.
Well, yeah. And now we're running into that where our young people can't afford to get houses. And that's an issue.
I'm sitting in a rental right now.
Yeah. I mean, although I always tell people, I was like, if you want to buy a house, just come to West Virginia. They're still affordable here.
I'm stuck in the swamp still, but I'll let you know if I.
Well, Richie, thank you for taking a little bit of time. There's so much to the story. I mean, we could talk all evening and probably just still start to scratch the surface. But the book is Riot Diet. It's out now.
Part 2's coming out beginning of 2025.
That was my next question: is there a second part? Because it seems like there's so much that you'd almost have to break it up.
When I realized that it's actually a mirror image of the same story, of these two different sides of the political spectrum descending into chaos and coming to clash with police because they mistrust the systems that police are enforcing. It's the same story. So it was like, this is the perfect sequel.
Yeah, I love that. You got to come back when you get the second one done. We got to talk again.
Preview I will give is I did take mushrooms and paddle out to go surfing at the beginning of both books. So once I realized that, I was like, this is uncanny. This is a sequel. I just have to do two separate versions of the same story. So
yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So definitely, yeah. If you just search Riot Diet on Amazon, it's available right now. It'll be on bookshelves hopefully soon enough, but I'm going one step at a time here because I'm doing it on my own. And pigeonpress.com is the publishing company that I started. It's just a lowly pigeon, not the cocky peacock or the cocky, but penguins and peacocks are both flightless, and the pigeon used to just deliver the messages. Right?
That's right.
So, there he is, right there.
I like that. That's great. Now I'm excited to get my copy. I know my wife and I will be reading it, and then it'll get passed around the family. So you'll have quite the viewership here in West Virginia.
My family, we don't agree politically at all, but we do not follow the rule of no politics at the dinner table at any point in time.
We do not either.
Nor have we ever, and that's just, I'm the middle of three boys, and we argue about politics more than anything. But it's like we're still family, so that's
my family, they love to argue, so they would intentionally get together just to argue. But once they got up from the table, everybody was fine. They just went back to their lives.
Exactly. That's the exact truth. My brothers certainly love to argue, especially with me, because being in the middle, they show me a lot. So that's the same thing that growing up as I experienced in between the cops and the protesters / rioters.
Full circle. Before I let you go, Richie, if I know where we can get the book, but where can we find out more from you? Do you have social media that we can kind of follow you on?
On all the platforms, RICHIE MCGINNISS. 2 I's, 2 N's, 2 S's. That's a nice, poorly spelled Irish name. Right.
Well, best of luck on the book and on your career going forward, because in my opinion, we need more people like you actually out there giving us what's actually going on without the spin. A lot of us, we're not out there seeing it for ourselves. So if it's getting spun a certain way, we may not even know it, and you're influenced a certain way, and you don't even realize that you're being influenced. I love that you're just out there telling the story. That's terrific.
At the very least, just it's transparency. It's like, well, I thought this about this guy and that guy, but this is my job, so I did this.
That's right. That's right. I love that. I'm on board with that. Thank you so much, Richie, and definitely, please, anytime, but definitely when the second book comes out, let's do this again.
Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. Okay, hold on one second. Richie McGinniss. Those of you that have watched the podcast for a while, you know that for years I intentionally stayed very in the middle so that we could talk to both sides of the aisle, not just politically, but more for us in the entertainment space, because you don't want to alienate everybody. I want people to come on, feel comfortable, have a conversation, and listen to their side. That nobody listens to this podcast for my opinion. You listen because I bring on these great guests. And that's why I listen too. I'm a fan. So I bring people on because I want to talk to them. I want to hear what they have to say. So I tend to keep the political stuff out of there, because I believe that this moment in history is kind of unique, kind of important. I've allowed the last several months to, kind of let some of that political stuff creep in a little bit, because I think it's important. And I've tried to hit both sides so that, we're giving you a chance to hear a little bit about both. So hopefully we've done a decent job with that. Hope you enjoyed today's interview. Please do yourself a favor and support Ritchie by purchasing RIOT Diet. I think you'll really enjoy it. He's a skateboarder and a surfer, and I'm sure that embedding himself in these dangerous situations, there's some adrenaline stuff going on there that I'm sure that not that he's doing it just for the rush, but I'm sure it helps kind of scratch that itch, so to speak, while he's delivering this terrific content. So absolutely loved having Ritchie on. We'll definitely bring him back. Please support us. Our YouTube channel is MeisterCon Pod. Please subscribe. It's free. Helps us a ton. Our website's meistercon.com. You can find almost 900 episodes, audio and video, both on there. So please check us out there as well. Thank you guys so much. Till next time. Bye, everybody.